The sky above the Deathworld colony was calm, painted with shades of amber and violet as the twin suns dipped below the horizon. Life on the planet was harsh as it had always been. Yet the Deathworlders, known for their resilience, thrived in conditions that would crush other species. Among them was Jarek Valter, a young and daring explorer who often found himself drawn to the unknown. On this particular evening, Jarek was tending to his ship, a rugged vessel that had survived countless journeys through hostile space. The air was thick with the scent of machinery and metal, a smell Jarek had grown to love. But tonight, the air carried something else: unease. Inside the colony's central command, alarms began to blare. A piercing red light flashed in sync with a deafening siren. Jarek's communicator crackled to life. "Jarek, get to command now," barked the voice of Commander Arlen, the colony's leader. "We've intercepted something strange." Without hesitation, Jarek dropped his tools and sprinted toward the command center. The corridors buzzed with activity as officers and technicians scrambled to their stations. Jarek entered the control room, where a holographic display projected a swirling star map. "What's going on?" Jarek asked, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. Commander Arlen turned to him, her face grim. "We've picked up a distress signal. It's coming from a system far beyond the safe zones. No known colonies or trade routes exist there." Jarek stepped closer to the display. The signal pulsed faintly, a rhythmic beacon that seemed almost alive. "Have we decoded it?" "We're working on it," replied Kira, the lead technician. Her fingers danced across the console as she analyzed the data. "The message is heavily encrypted. But one thing is clear: it's desperate." The room fell silent as Kira played the first decoded fragment. A voice, shaky and filled with terror, echoed through the room. "Help us. They are coming. We cannot hold them off. Please, anyone." The message cut off, replaced by static. A shiver ran down Jarek's spine. "Who are they?" he murmured. "That's what we need to find out," Commander Arlen said. She turned to the room. "This could be a trap. We have no idea who sent this or what they're dealing with. But ignoring it isn't an option. Not if there's a chance lives are at stake." "Do we know the source of the signal?" Jarek asked. Kira nodded. "It's coming from a star system on the edge of the galaxy, near the Erebus Nebula. That region is notorious for its unstable conditions and strange disappearances." "Great," Jarek said with a wry smile. "Just the kind of place I like to visit." Commander Arlen shot him a look. "This isn't a joke, Jarek. If you volunteer for this mission, you might not come back." Jarek met her gaze, determination in his eyes. "If there's even a small chance someone needs help, I have to go. That's what we stand for, isn't it?" Arlen sighed but nodded. "You'll need a team. Take the Raven's Claw and gather your best people. We'll continue decoding the message and send updates to your ship." As Jarek left the command center, he felt a mix of excitement and dread. The signal had come from a place no one dared to explore, a region cloaked in mystery and danger. But it was also an opportunity to prove what Deathworlders were capable of, not just surviving but standing up for those who couldn't defend themselves. A crew assembled. By nightfall, Jarek had assembled his crew. Lena, a brilliant engineer with a knack for solving impossible problems. Toran, a seasoned pilot with nerves of steel. And Maiko, a young but resourceful medic who had a history of staying calm under pressure. In the ship's briefing room, Jarek shared what little they knew about the mission. "We're heading into uncharted territory," he began. "The signal source is an abandoned star system near the Erebus Nebula. We don't know who sent it or what's waiting for us, but it's clear they're in trouble. Or luring us into trouble," Toran said, arms crossed. Lena leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "Even if it's a trap, we're Deathworlders. We're not exactly easy prey." Meko nodded. "And if it's not a trap, if they really need help, we'd never forgive ourselves for turning our backs." Jarek smiled. "Exactly. This won't be easy, but if we succeed, We could make a difference that echoes across the galaxy. The Raven's Claw takes flight. As the Raven's Claw lifted off, the colony grew smaller and smaller until it was just a dot on the planet's surface. Jarek stood at the ship's helm, staring into the vast expanse of stars ahead. The signal still pulsed faintly on their monitor, like a distant heartbeat calling them forward. Toran's voice crackled over the intercom. "We're entering the outskirts of the Erebus Nebula. Buckle up. It's about to get rough." The ship rattled as they encountered the nebula's infamous energy storms. Flashes of light illuminated the dark void, casting eerie shadows across the crew. In the cockpit, Jarek gripped the controls, his heart pounding. As they neared the signal's coordinates, the tension in the air grew thick. "We're close," Lena said, her voice tight with anticipation. "Whatever sent that message, we're about to find out." The Raven's Claw dropped out of warp, and the view before them stole their breath. A planet, scared and broken, floated in the darkness. Above it, a massive alien structure loomed, pulsating with an unnatural energy. "What the hell is that?" Toran whispered. Jarek's eyes narrowed. "Our mission." The Raven's Claw glided silently toward the broken planet. Its surface was a patchwork of craters and jagged scars, the kind left behind by violent battles or devastating natural disasters. As the crew stared out the viewport, the sheer desolation chilled their spirits. "This place looks like it's been through hell," Toran muttered, his hand steady on the controls. "It's more than just war," Lena added, analyzing the planet's topography on her tablet. "These scars, they're unnatural. Something big and destructive caused this." Jarek leaned forward, his gaze locked on the enormous alien structure floating above the planet's surface. Its sleek yet menacing design made it clear it wasn't built for peace. The pulsating energy it emitted bathed the nearby space in a faint, sickly glow. "Whatever that thing is," Jarek said, pointing at the structure, "it's the source of the signal. We need to find a way inside." "Are we even sure anyone's still alive down there?" Maiko asked from her station. Jarek hesitated before answering. "No, but we owe it to them to find out." Approaching the unknown. As the ship neared the structure, the Raven's Claw trembled, and the lights flickered. "We're hitting some kind of interference," Lena said, her fingers flying over the console. "It's like the structure is scrambling our systems." "Can you stabilize it?" Jarek asked, gripping the edge of his seat. "Working on it," Lena replied, sweat beading on her forehead. Toran gritted his teeth, his focus unwavering as he navigated through the turbulence. "I can keep her steady, but if this gets worse, we might need to turn back." "We're not turning back," Jarek said firmly. Suddenly, the interference stopped, and a strange calm settled over the ship. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. "Did it stop on its own?" Maiko asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Before anyone could answer, a low, resonating hum echoed through the ship. It wasn't mechanical. It felt alive. "What the hell was that?" Toran said, his voice sharp. Jarek stood. "Lena, scan the structure. I want to know what we're dealing with." Lena nodded and began the scan, her screen filling with incomprehensible data. After a moment, her face paled. "This can't be right," she said. "What?" Jarek asked. "There's something inside the structure," Lena replied, her voice trembling. "Something massive, and it's moving." The landing. The crew decided to land on the planet's surface, close to the base of the alien structure. As the Raven's Claw descended, the extent of the planet's devastation became even clearer. Towering spires of melted rock jutted out like skeletal remains, and rivers of molten lava snaked through the craters. The ship touched down with a gentle thud, and the crew geared up for their mission. Jarek strapped on his exosuit, the reinforced armor designed to withstand hostile environments. Lena carried a portable hacking module, while Maiko packed an advanced medical kit. Toran, ever the pragmatist, slung a plasma rifle over his shoulder. "Remember," Jarek said, addressing the team. Our priority is to locate the source of the signal and determine if there are survivors. Stay sharp and stick together. The crew stepped out of the Raven's claw, their boots crunching on the charred ground. The air was thick with ash, and the sky was a swirling mass of dark clouds. The alien structure loomed above them, its surface covered in glowing symbols that shifted and pulsed like a heartbeat. This thing gives me the creeps, Maiko said, glancing up at the structure. You're not alone, Torin replied, his grip tightening on his rifle. The signal's origin. As they approached the base of the structure, Lena's scanner began to beep rapidly. We're close to the source, she said. It's coming from inside. They found a hatch at the base of the structure, its edges glowing faintly. Jarek examined it closely. Lena, can you open this? He asked. Give me a minute, she replied, setting up her hacking module. As Lena worked, the low hum they'd heard earlier returned, louder and more intense. It reverberated through their suits, making their skin crawl. Whatever's in there doesn't want us here, Torin said, his voice tight. Too bad, Jarek replied. We're not leaving until we find out what's going on. The hatch hissed open, revealing a dark, winding tunnel. The walls glowed faintly with the same shifting symbols. Everyone stay close, Jarek said, leading the way inside. The discovery. The tunnel descended deep into the structure, the glowing symbols casting eerie shadows on the walls. The further they went, the louder the hum became, until it was almost deafening. Finally, they entered a massive chamber. At its center was a crystalline device, pulsating with energy. Surrounding it were several alien bodies, their forms twisted and lifeless. Looks like they tried to stop whatever this is, Lena said, her voice shaky. Jarek approached the device cautiously. The moment he got close, his communicator crackled to life. You shouldn't have come, a voice whispered, distorted but unmistakably alien. The crew froze. What was that? Maiko asked, panic creeping into her voice. Before anyone could respond, the chamber began to tremble. The crystalline device flared brightly, and the symbols on the walls shifted violently. Jarek, Lena shouted. Something's activating. Fall back, Jarek ordered, but before they could move, the chamber was flooded with a blinding light. The blinding light from the crystalline device engulfed the entire chamber, forcing the crew to shield their eyes. The hum that had haunted them since their arrival reached an ear-splitting crescendo. Every surface of the chamber seemed to ripple with energy, as if the very air was alive. Get back, Jarek shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the sound. He grabbed Lena and pulled her toward a wall, using his body to shield her from the radiant energy. Turan and Miko scrambled to find cover, but the light was everywhere, pressing down on them like an invisible weight. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. And then, with a violent shudder, the light abruptly cut off, leaving the room in darkness. The hum diminished to a soft buzz. The crew blinked in the sudden silence, disoriented and confused. What the hell just happened? Maiko gasped, her voice shaking. Jarek stood up cautiously, scanning the chamber. His hand instinctively went to the grip of his plasma rifle, his mind racing. Something was wrong. They hadn't been caught in the light, but something was different. The air had thickened. The walls of the structure seemed to pulse as if they were breathing. We need to move, Jarek said, his voice low and steady. Whatever that was, it wasn't a friendly welcome. Keep your eyes open. The crew slowly made their way toward the center of the chamber, where the crystalline device still sat, now flickering with a faint blue glow. The bodies of the aliens remained motionless around it, but something about the way the device shimmered suggested it had just been awakened. Look at this, Lena said, approaching the device with caution. It's reacting to us. Jarek felt a shiver run down his spine. Is it trying to communicate? Lena knelt beside the device, her hands trembling as she activated her portable scanner. The readings on her screen flickered wildly, spitting out incomprehensible data. It was like trying to read a language that was both ancient and alien. "It's too complex," Lena murmured, her frustration evident. "I can't even begin to understand the pattern. But it's definitely trying to establish a connection." Before anyone could respond, the device pulsed with a sudden surge of energy, sending a shockwave through the chamber. The crew staggered back, barely managing to stay on their feet. "What the hell is it doing?" Torin growled, his voice tense as he readied his weapon. Jarek's mind raced. "We need to find out who or what is controlling this thing, and fast. This could be the key to everything. The signal, the destruction on the planet, the alien corpses, it all points to this." But as he spoke, something shifted within the chamber. The air seemed to thicken, and a low, grinding sound filled the room, coming from somewhere deep within the structure. It was as if the entire building was waking up, like it had been dormant for centuries, and now, with the device's activation, it was ready to move. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet trembled. The chamber's walls groaned, and in the distance, the crew heard something that made their blood run cold. Footsteps. Heavy, unnatural footsteps. "What is that sound?" Maiko whispered, her voice barely audible. Jarek's instincts kicked in. "Get ready," he ordered. "Weapons up, everyone. This is no longer a rescue mission. It's a fight for survival." The crew fanned out, positioning themselves near cover. Their eyes darted from one end of the chamber to the other, expecting something monstrous to appear at any moment. A new noise broke through, the sound of grinding metal. The walls of the chamber seemed to split open, revealing a massive passageway leading deeper into the structure. The vibrations were stronger now, as if something enormous was stirring below. "We're not alone," Lena said, her voice barely a whisper. Jarek nodded grimly. "No kidding. Whatever's down there, it's probably been waiting for us." Suddenly, the footsteps grew louder, closer, and with a final roar, a massive door at the far end of the room screeched open, revealing what had been hidden behind it. A gigantic, armored figure. The crew gasped. It was humanoid, towering over them by several meters, its body encased in thick alien armor that gleamed with a cold, deadly light. Its eyes burned with an ominous red glow as it stepped forward, its footsteps shaking the very ground. "Whatever it is," Torin said, "it's coming for us." Jarek's heart raced. "Stay calm. We don't know if it's hostile yet, but if it is, we fight." The armored figure paused for a moment, its mechanical head swiveling to scan the room. It didn't move closer at first. Instead, it studied them, its movements slow and deliberate, as if it were assessing them, calculating the best course of action. Then, to their shock, the figure spoke. "You have awakened the Reclaimer," it said in a low, distorted voice. "The trial begins now." The chamber's hum intensified as the Reclaimer's voice faded into silence. Jarek's heart pounded in his chest as he turned to face his crew. The room around them felt suffocating, the air thick with tension and uncertainty. "What's happening?" Maiko whispered, her eyes wide with fear. This doesn't feel right." Lena looked at the glowing platform in the center of the room, where the Reclaimer had stood moments before. The device was alive again, its strange crystalline form pulsing in time with the now aggressive hum of the chamber. "We're about to find out," Jarek muttered, his hand tightening around the grip of his plasma rifle. He knew they had no choice. They had committed themselves to this path the moment they had arrived. "Get ready. Whatever this is, we're doing it together." Toran, always the skeptic, shot Jarek a wary glance. "You think we can trust it? We're talking about something ancient, something that's been waiting for us for gods know how long. We don't even know what this trial is." "We have to trust the Reclaimer's words," Jarek replied, though doubt lingered in his voice. "This is bigger than us. The galaxy is depending on us." As if on cue, the floor beneath their feet began to rumble. The air became dense, and the walls of the chamber shimmered with an eerie light. A large, dark doorway at the far end of the room slid open with a grinding sound, revealing a massive corridor. It stretched into the darkness, its walls lined with ancient symbols that seemed to shift and change before their eyes. The Reclaimer's voice echoed once more, booming from nowhere and everywhere at once. "The gauntlet awaits. You have chosen. Now you will prove your worth." Jarek exchanged a brief glance with his team. It was time. They had to face whatever lay ahead. "Stay close," he ordered, his voice firm. "We move together. One mistake could be our last." The crew stepped forward into the dark corridor. The further they walked, the more oppressive the air became, as if something invisible was pressing down on them, squeezing the very life from their bodies. Lena's scanner was picking up strange energy readings, and she frowned, trying to make sense of them. "These readings don't make sense," she muttered. "It's like the very environment is alive. The energy flux here is chaotic." They continued, stepping cautiously through the gloom, their weapons held at the ready. They passed through archways covered in alien inscriptions, their steps echoing in the cavernous space. The deeper they went, the more they felt like they were intruding on something sacred, something far older than any civilization they knew. At the far end of the corridor, they reached a massive chamber, its walls adorned with intricate carvings of ancient battles and powerful beings locked in struggle. The chamber was lit by a strange, dim light that seemed to come from nowhere. The floor was covered in thick layers of dust, evidence that no one had set foot here for a long time. Suddenly, a large door slammed shut behind them with a resounding crash, trapping them inside. The crew jumped, their hearts racing. "Is that the trial?" Toran asked, his voice filled with concern. "Are we supposed to fight our way out?" Before Jarek could respond, the ground trembled once more. A series of sharp, mechanical clicks sounded, and the walls seemed to shift. Something was moving. The Reclaimer's voice filled the chamber again, now distorted and layered, as though it was coming from multiple directions. "The gauntlet has been set. You will face 3 trials. The first, courage. The second, strength. The third, sacrifice. Only those who pass all 3 will be deemed worthy." As the last words echoed away, the ground beneath them cracked open. Huge stone pillars rose from the floor, each covered in strange alien runes. They began to move, circling the crew in an intricate pattern, creating a barrier between them and the entrance. "This isn't a trial of skill or strength," Jarek muttered, his eyes narrowing as he studied the shifting pillars. "This is a test of our minds, of our souls." Suddenly, a loud crash split the air. From the shadows, something massive appeared, towering over them. It was a creature, ferocious and monstrous, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly fire. Its body was armored with thick, chitinous plates, and its 4 massive arms rippled with muscle. The creature let out an ear-piercing roar, its fangs glinting as it charged. "We have to fight it," Lena gasped, drawing her weapon. "We have no choice." Jarek held up his hand to stop her. "No, this is part of the trial. We don't know what we're up against yet." But the creature didn't wait for them to make a decision. With a deafening growl, it lunged, its claws slashing through the air. The crew instinctively scattered, diving behind the pillars for cover. Jarek's mind raced. This wasn't just a fight. There was something more to this. The Reclaimer had said the trial was about courage. It wasn't just about surviving this creature. It was about facing their fears, their doubts. As the creature circled, its glowing eyes locking onto Jarek, a sudden realization hit him. "This is a test of our unity," he said, his voice clear. "We have to fight together. We can't take this thing on alone." Lena, Maiko, and Toran nodded in unison. They had trained together for years. They had survived countless missions. And now, they would face their greatest challenge. The creature roared again, charging straight at Jarek. They were ready. The creature's claws slashed the air with terrifying speed as it barreled toward Jarek. The sound of its roar reverberated through the chamber, vibrating the very walls. Each step it took shook the ground beneath their feet. Its eyes glowed with malevolent intent as it locked onto Jurek, its powerful jaws snapping hungrily. "Stay together," Jurek yelled, his voice sharp with urgency. "We can take it down, but only if we fight as one." The crew had no time to argue. The trial had begun, and there was no turning back. Maiko reacted first, her hand steady as she activated her energy blade. She dashed toward the creature's side, leaping over a pillar in a fluid motion. The blade hummed with power as she aimed for the creature's exposed flank. The moment her weapon made contact with the creature's thick armor, a spark of energy flared, but the blade barely scratched the surface. "This thing is tougher than we thought," Maiko grunted, quickly rolling out of the way as the creature swung its massive arm in retaliation. Toran was next, opening fire with his plasma rifle. The beams hit the creature's armor with a loud sizzling sound, but it did little to slow it down. The beast howled in fury and swiped a massive paw at Toran, sending him crashing into a nearby pillar. "Stay focused," Jurek shouted as he aimed his own rifle, taking a few quick shots. Each blast seemed to have no effect on the beast's tough exterior. Lena was behind them, her scanner beeping urgently as it analyzed the creature. "It's adapting to our attacks," she shouted, her brow furrowed. "We need to find a weakness." But the creature wasn't waiting for them to figure it out. It turned sharply, its massive tail whipping around to strike. The impact sent Maiko flying across the room, crashing into a wall. "Maiko," Jurek called out, his heart racing. His instincts told him to run to her, but he knew he couldn't leave the team vulnerable. They had to defeat this thing together, or they would all fall. Toran staggered to his feet, shaking off the impact of the blow. "We need to work as a team," he yelled, grabbing a second rifle from his pack. "Focus on its legs. It's too fast when we attack head-on." Jurek nodded, his mind racing. The creature was relentless, but they had something it didn't: unity. "All right," Jurek said, voice steady despite the danger. "Everyone, target the legs. Maiko, get back in the fight when you can. We're breaking it down, piece by piece." The crew shifted into formation, covering each other's backs. They worked as one. Maiko now standing, her energy blade crackling with renewed strength. She dashed forward again, drawing the creature's attention away from the others. With the monster distracted, Toran and Lena opened fire on its massive legs, the plasma shots sizzling as they scored hits on its thick hide. The creature howled, swiping at the air with its claws in a blind rage. But the Deathworlders were swift, anticipating its moves. Jurek's pulse quickened. They were doing it. Slowly but surely, the creature began to slow down, its movements less precise as its legs were damaged by their combined attacks. "Yes," Maiko shouted, her blade finding a gap in the creature's underbelly as she slid beneath it. With a powerful thrust, the blade pierced deep into the beast's flesh, sending shockwaves through its body. The creature's roar filled the room again, but now it was filled with pain and anger. It staggered, its massive body shaking violently. The air seemed to crackle with the energy of the battle. Jurek, Lena, and Toran pressed forward, pushing the creature to its breaking point. With one final coordinated effort, the team delivered a barrage of attacks to its legs and underbelly. The beast let out one last agonizing roar before collapsing to the ground with a heavy thud, the chamber vibrating from its fall. For a long moment, there was silence. Jurek dropped to his knees, gasping for breath, sweat dripping from his forehead. His team did the same, their bodies aching from the brutal fight. We did it," Lena said, her voice barely a whisper. "We passed the first trial," Jurek said, his voice grim but filled with relief. "But there are 2 more ahead of us. We can't let our guard down yet." The Reclaimer's voice echoed through the chamber once more, cold and distant, as if it had been watching the entire fight. "You have passed the first trial. Courage. You have fought without hesitation. But now, the trial of strength begins. The walls of the chamber shifted once again, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. The air became thick with pressure as the team braced themselves. "Get ready," Jarek said, his voice firm. "We're not done yet." The ground beneath their feet rumbled, a deep, low vibration that seemed to seep into their bones. The air felt dense with anticipation as the walls of the chamber began to shift, revealing the next trial. Jarek's breath quickened. The first trial had been tough, but the Reclaimer's words hung in his mind, echoing with the promise of even greater challenges to come. "You've passed the first trial." "Courage," the Reclaimer's voice repeated, cold and clinical. "Now, the trial of strength begins." With the walls fully parted, the team found themselves standing in a massive arena. The arena was unlike anything they had seen before. A sky of swirling dark clouds loomed overhead, casting an eerie, unnatural light across the floor. A vast chasm lay in the center, with jagged rocks jutting out like the teeth of some monstrous beast. The team had no time to process their surroundings, however. From the darkness of the arena, massive shapes began to emerge. Creatures of terrifying proportions, their silhouettes only partially visible. Every movement they made was deliberate, slow, but powerful. "Stay sharp," Jarek warned, tightening his grip on his weapon. "This isn't over yet." The creatures began to step forward, and Jarek's heart skipped a beat as their forms became clearer. They were massive, twice the size of the largest Deathworld predators Jarek had ever encountered. Their armor-like exoskeletons gleamed with an unnatural sheen, while their eyes burned with a cold, predatory intelligence. Each step they took made the ground tremble, and with each movement, the atmosphere seemed to grow heavier. The creatures stopped just short of the crew, standing in a circle around them. There were at least 6 of them, and they exuded an aura of unmatched strength. Their size alone made Jarek question how they could stand a chance against such beings. But Jarek's resolve didn't waver. The team had survived the first trial together, and they would survive this one as well. "They'll come for us, one at a time," Maiko said, her voice calm but firm as she assessed the situation. "We need to focus on one and take it down fast." "Right," Toran agreed, his hand steady as he adjusted the settings on his rifle. "One at a time. We've trained for this." The first of the creatures roared, a sound that shook the very air around them. It lunged forward, its massive claws slashing through the air with terrifying speed. "Move," Jarek shouted. The crew scattered in different directions, their bodies instinctively separating to avoid being cornered. The creature's claws swept dangerously close to Maiko, who narrowly dodged its swipe, rolling across the floor. She was already up on her feet, her energy blade flashing in the dim light as she charged at the beast's side. But the creature was fast, too fast. It turned in a blur of motion, its claws coming down again, forcing Maiko to leap backward just in time. The force of the impact sent shockwaves through the ground, rattling Jarek's bones. Not fast enough. Maiko gritted her teeth, preparing for another strike. Jarek didn't hesitate. With a signal, he ordered Lena to provide support. "Lena, fire at its legs. Slow it down." Lena raised her plasma rifle, her fingers steady on the trigger. The burst of energy lit up the darkness as she fired, striking one of the creature's thick legs. It howled in pain, staggering momentarily, but it wasn't enough to stop its assault. Toran took his chance. He sprinted forward, his plasma rifle firing in rapid succession, targeting the creature's head. The creature screeched as the shots hit its armored skull, but it didn't seem to faze it. It turned on Toran with terrifying speed, its tail whipping across the arena to strike him. Toran barely dodged, but the tail grazed his side, sending him stumbling back with a grunt. His eyes were filled with determination, but the pain was evident. He shook it off and kept his focus. "We need to hit its weak points," Jarek shouted. "Aim for the joints, the underbelly, its eyes, The team quickly adjusted their tactics. They targeted the vulnerable spots, the joints between the creature's armor, the soft underbelly. It wasn't easy, but they had no choice. With each strike, they wore it down, the creature's movements slowing as they continued their assault. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the creature staggered and collapsed with a tremendous crash. Its enormous body hit the ground with a loud thud that rattled the arena. "That's one down," Maiko said between heavy breaths, her energy blade humming as she wiped the sweat from her brow. But there was no time to rest. The other creatures began to close in on them, their eyes filled with bloodlust. They were getting closer. "There's more where that came from," Torin said grimly. "We can do this. Together." But the battle was far from over. Jarek's mind raced. They had barely taken down one of these behemoths. They had to stay focused, stay sharp. The trial of strength would demand everything they had, and perhaps more.